What is going on, everybody? My name is Andrew, and welcome back to the final number 4 out of 4 of my vlogs. I hope you guys have made it all the way through. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Had a really good time watching, learning, growing with me. It's been a phenomenal experience to revise, revisit all of my assignments for you, for me. So let's get into the final one. I'm kind of sad this is ending. Maybe we can continue this. Maybe I'll release a part 5. Um, but yeah, let's talk about an assignment I did. It was called the student facilitator assignment. So what I did was I presented a slideshow and it explored how we understood and respond to student behavior, especially in outdoor and nature-based learning environments. This covered nature pedagogy, which goes off perfectly from video 3 and what we talked about. So let's get started. So one of the strongest aspects of this presentation is that it takes a clear stance, right? So rather than presenting facts that I found within the book that we read, I argue that uh, internal motivation matters more than external control. Students grow through responsibility, not compliance. This is seen when we, for example, read about the bird feeders in the book, right, and how they made bird feeders physically by hand, and they were responsible for the birds getting fed. So they had a duty to complete, right, when they did these bird feeders. I also covered the concept of total behavior, so thoughts, feelings, actions, uh, everything that has to do with a sophisticated view of learners. So instead of reducing behavior to obedience or misbehavior, our presentation framed behavior as the result of interconnected systems, I would say, right? So this supports empathy, uh, reflective teaching, trauma informed practice, right? Which is what we talked about in class, especially in environments where learners are exposed to risk. Right, risk was a big, not danger. You're not supposed to put them in danger, but a little risk is okay for students to experience. Um, my iceberg metaphor that I presented, um, it reminds us that we see distraction, defiance, risk taking is often driven by things we don't see, right? So on the surface, we see all these things: distraction, defiance, risk taking. But under, there could be fear, confusion, unmet needs, a lack of agency, any one of 1,000 problems that it could be. And it's your job as an educator to find out what that problem is. So um, it's important to look under the surface when you're teaching these students and you're trying to figure out why are they acting out in class, what's going on, you know. I'm going to touch a little bit on risk taking, right? So this was a big topic that we discussed about, a lot of students discussed about in class. So rather than eliminating the risk in an assignment or in an environment that we put our students in, my presentation argues for risk benefit assessment, right? So helping learners evaluate the danger that they're put in and make decisions based off of what situations they're in so they can build confidence next time they're in that situation, and this closely aligns with nature pedagogy because it's all about preparing the students for real world problem solving. So I want to touch on the critiques. I didn't necessarily receive feedback of the critiques. However, I did look back on my own assignment and I wanted to talk about some of the things that I could have done better. Um, so, an area of growth for me is theoretical explicitness. So, although the my ideas, or I guess the ideas presented in the book, are drawn from behaviorism techniques, constructivism, humanistic education, these frameworks are not consistently named, right? So I should be doing a better job at naming and defining what I'm talking about and why it's effective. What is the term? Let's define it. And how do we apply it within a nature based setting? Um, I think my early slides were a little bit dense and abstract. So, for an audience unfamiliar with behavioral theory, which we're not, we discussed it a lot in class. But for example, if I were to be talking to an audience that was unfamiliar with this topic, starting with a concrete classroom outdoor example could help them understand what I'm talking about before the conceptual frameworks were introduced. I think that would have been better. Say, for example, my audience was not sure what I was discussing. I was just introducing this to them. Um, and the presentation assumes conditions may not exist everywhere. So addressing like urban settings and limited outdoor access, staffing constraints, anything that will affect how nature-based pedagogy is applied in a lesson. Would make the argument more realistic, and adaptable. We could have talked about that a little bit more. But I do think overall, my presentation does reflect a pretty good understanding of nature based pedagogy, and I think I did a good job at conceptualizing the ideas in the book and applying them. I strongly think that nature based pedagogy could be super beneficial for a classroom. I think that if we had a connection, meeting, and agency, a purpose to teach this, it could be effective. When I was doing my assignment, that's all I could think about. But if you refer back to video three, if I actually taught this in a classroom, how would it go? How would it be effective? Could I do this? And will my students like it? You know what I mean? I think they would, and I think they could benefit a lot from it. I think um, there's a lot of benefits to nature-based pedagogy. So I plan. I'm going to say plan because we never know once we get into a school how the system is set up, how assignments are regulated, how what we teach is regulated. But I plan to add this into my classroom as much as possible. If we can get outside, I think students would enjoy being outside too. I think this is just all around a great thing to apply in your classrooms. I think this could be really, really, really effective. But I do plan to do this in the future if the school will allow me to do it. And I would love to see how this theoretical practice would do inside a classroom. I want to see if we can bring those practices into real life and how the students would respond, how the assessment would look. It would be interesting to see how I would apply this to a classroom. I think it's called SEEQs we all fill out at the end of the year. I would want to do that with my students just to see how they would like going outside and exploring and observing nature. Maybe even doing some like for example, making bird feeders or something outside that can be explored. I would really like to see how this would positively benefit the learner. So I definitely plan to do this in my future classrooms. Again, I'm not sure the restrictions that the school might give. So we have to be a little bit careful with that, but I think it could be a great idea. Um, so that is all I have for you guys today. We have reached the final episode of the vlog. You guys are awesome. You stuck around the entire time, and now we're here. And I hope you gained a little bit of insight on your own teaching practices and your teaching pedagogy. Maybe consider nature-based pedagogy as something that can be beneficial for you because I think it could be a great and awesome thing. The use of AI, as we talked about through 1 and 2 as well. I think there's a lot of great things that can be pulled from these videos. So Thank you guys for watching. My name is Andrew, and I will see you guys in the future, hopefully. Peace.